Today we are on day 3 of A Beautiful Year in the Bible, our 52-week Bible study for women. Day 3, we are reading Joshua chapters 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Joshua chapter 1. Chapter 1 is about God encouraging Joshua to cross over into the promised land with the Israelites. Moses had just died, and God is instructing Joshua that he needs to continue taking the Israelites over to the promised land, and he has to finish out what Moses started. And I love chapter 1 because it is our Be Strong and Courageous scripture. It is mentioned 3 times where God tells Joshua that he has to be strong and courageous, but he tells him to be strong and courageous because of who the Lord is. The Lord's presence is what makes Joshua have courage. It has nothing to do with him actually being physically strong. If you continue reading in chapter 1, verse 10, Joshua starts to prepare the people for what God is going to do. He tells them in verse 11, "Go through the camp and tell the people to get provisions ready for yourselves, for within 3 days you will be crossing the Jordan to go in and take possession of the land the Lord your God is giving you to inherit." I love how the people respond to Joshua. In verse 16, it says, "They answered Joshua, 'Everything you have commanded us, we will do, and everywhere you send us, we will go. We will obey you just as we obeyed Moses in everything. Certainly the Lord your God will be with you, as he has with Moses. Anyone who rebels against your order and does not obey your words in all that you have commanded him will be put to death. Above all, be strong and courageous." And then it goes on into chapter 2, where Joshua sends spies into Jericho. We also get to meet the prostitute Rahab, who hides the 2 spies, and she lies to the king's men so that the 2 spies could get back. But she does this in hopes that she is going to secure a future for her family. She knows that they are God's people, and she knows that if they promise to her that they will keep her safe, that they will actually keep her safe. So she makes them promise that. They make her promise that that Rahab will not turn them over. And everybody keeps their promise here. She gets her family and secures them in her home so that when the Israelites come and Joshua brings the Israelites into Jericho, they are not destroyed. And then we go on to chapter 3. Now in chapter 3, we are going to be talking about them crossing the Jordan. I am going to read this because it was really good. Joshua started early the next morning and left the Acacia Grove with all the Israelites. They went as far as the Jordan and stayed there before crossing. After 3 days, the officers went through the camp and commanded the people, "When you see the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God carried by the Levitical priest, you are to break camp and follow it, but keep a distance of about 1,000 yards between yourselves and the ark. Don't go near it so that you can see the way to go, for you haven't traveled this way before." Joshua told the people, "Consecrate yourselves, because the Lord will do wonders among you tomorrow." Then he said to the priest, "Carry the Ark of the Covenant and go on ahead of the people." So they carried the Ark of the Covenant and went ahead of them. The Lord spoke to Joshua, "Today I will begin to exalt you in the sight of Israel, so they will know that I will be with you just as I was with Moses. Command the priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant when you reach the edge of the water. Stand in the Jordan." He tells them to stand in the Jordan. Then Joshua told the Israelites, "Come closer and listen to the words of the Lord your God." He said, "You will know that the living God is among you, and that he will certainly dispossess before you the Canaanites, Hittites, Hivites, Perizzites, Gishonites, Amorites, and Jebusites, when the ark of the covenant of the Lord and the whole earth goes ahead of you and into the Jordan. Now choose 12 men from among the tribes of Israel, 1 man for each tribe. When the feet of the priests who carry the ark of the Lord of the whole earth, that says it many times in the scripture, the Lord of the whole earth, come to rest in the Jordan water, its water will be cut off. The water flowing downstream will stand up in a mass. When the people broke camp to cross the Jordan, the priest carried the Ark of the Covenant ahead of the people. Now the Jordan overflows the banks throughout the harvest season. But soon as the priests carry the ark reached the Jordan, their feet touched the water and its edge, and the water flowing downstream stood still, rising up in a mass that extended as far as Adam, a city next to Zarethan. The water flowing downstream into the Sea of the Arabah, the Dead Sea, was completely cut off, the people crossing opposite Jericho. The priests carrying the Ark of the Lord's covenant stood firmly on dry ground in the middle of the Jordan, while all Israel crossed on dry ground until the entire nation had finished crossing the Jordan. Is that not awesome, y'all? That's so amazing. Now, chapter 4 of Joshua. After the entire nation had finished crossing the Jordan, the Lord spoke to Joshua. Choose 12 men from the people, 1 man for each tribe, and command them, take 12 stones from this place in the middle of the Jordan where the priests are standing. Carry them with you and set them down at a place where you spend the night. I feel like that's super important, is that they had to carry it to the place that they stopped at. And so Joshua summoned the 12 men he had selected from the Israelites, 1 for each tribe, and said to them, go across to the ark of the Lord your God in the middle of the Jordan. Each of you lift a stone onto his shoulder, 1 for each of the Israelite tribes, so that this will be a sign among you. In the future, when your children ask you, what do these stones mean to you? You should tell them the water of the Jordan was cut off in front of the ark of the Lord's covenant. When it crossed the Jordan's water was cut off. Therefore, these stones will always be a memorial for the Israelites. So they said God was telling them to set up a memorial. And it says the Israelites did just as Joshua had commanded them. The 12 men took stones from the middle of the Jordan. Now, we have to realize that the Jordan is still dry ground right now. I mean, he's kept it dry ground for a little bit. It's not just an in and out. It was dry and then all of a sudden. But it's still dry. It says 1 of each of the Israelite tribes, just as the Lord had told Joshua. They carried them into the camp and set them down there. Joshua also set up 12 stones in the middle of the Jordan, where the priests who carried the Ark of the Covenant were standing. The stones are still there today. So it's saying that they're still there today. The priests carrying the ark continued standing in the middle of the Jordan until everything was completed that the Lord had commanded Joshua to tell the people. In keeping with all that Moses had commanded Joshua, the people hurried across, and after everyone had finished crossing, the priests with the ark of the Lord crossed in the sight of the people. The Reubenites, Gadites, and half the tribe of Manasseh went into battle formation in front of the Israelites. So they went before the Israelites, as Moses had instructed them. About 40,000, man, that's a lot of people. About 40,000 equipped for war crossed to the plains of Jericho in the Lord's presence. On that day, the Lord exalted Joshua in the sight of all Israel, and they revered him throughout his life, as they have revered Moses. The Lord told Joshua, command the priests who carry the ark of the testimony to come up from the Jordan. So Joshua commanded the priest, "Come up from the Jordan." When the priests carry the ark of the Lord's covenant came up from the middle of the Jordan, and their feet stepped out on solid ground. The water of the Jordan resumed its course, flowing over all the banks as before. The people came up from the Jordan on the 10th day of the first month and camped at Gilgal on the eastern limits of Jericho. Then Joshua set up in Gilgal the 12 stones they had taken from the Jordan, and he said to the Israelites, "In the future, when your children ask their fathers what's the meaning of these stones, you should tell the children, Israel crossed the Jordan on dry ground. For the Lord your God dried up the water on the Jordan before you until you had crossed over, just as the Lord your God had done the Red Sea, which had dried up before us until we had crossed over. This is so that all the people of the earth may know that the Lord's hand is strong, and so that you may always fear the Lord your God." So that is God showing how powerful he was in chapter 4. That is God showing how powerful he is. And he even had them set up stones to keep that testimony. Now we are in the second part of chapter 5, and it says, "Food from the land." While the Israelites camped at Gilgal on the plains of Jericho, they observed the Passover on the evening of the 14th day of the month. The day after Passover, they ate unleavened bread and roasted grain from the produce of the land. And the day after they ate from the produce of the land, the manna ceased. Since there was no more manna for the Israelites, they ate from the crops of the land of Canaan that year. And then they have about the commander of the Lord's army. When Joshua was near Jericho, he looked up and saw a man standing in front of him with a drawn sword in his hand. Joshua approached him and asked, "Are you for us or our enemies?" "Neither," he replied. "I have now come as commander of the Lord's army." Then Joshua bowed with his face to the ground in homage and asked him, "What does my Lord want to say to his servant?" And the commander of the Lord's army said to Joshua, "Remove the sandals from your feet, for the place where you are standing is holy." And Joshua did that. He was obedient, wasn't he? So we got to read all about God's goodness. We got to read all about God's power. We got to read about the relationship between God and humanity in Joshua. And I hope that y'all enjoyed it. I will talk to y'all tomorrow for our day 4. Now we are in Joshua chapter 5, circumcision of the Israelites. When all of the Amorite kings across the Jordan to the west and all the Canaanite kings near the sea heard how the Lord had dried up the water on the Jordan before the Israelites until they had crossed over, they lost heart and their courage failed because of the Israelites. So I think they're saying that they had lost heart and their courage failed because of what God had done for the Israelites. At that time, the Lord said to Joshua, "Make flint knives and circumcise the Israelite men again." So Joshua made flint knives and circumcised the Israelite men at Gilbreth. I don't know how to say that word. This is the reason Joshua circumcised them. All the people who came out of Egypt who were males, all the men of war, had died in the wilderness along the way after they had come out of Egypt. Though all the people who came out were circumcised, none of the people born in the wilderness along the way were circumcised after they had come out of Egypt. For the Israelites wandered in the wilderness 40 years until all the nation's men of war who came out of Egypt had died off because they did not obey the Lord. So the Lord vowed never to let them set the land see the land that he had sworn to their ancestors to give us, a land flowing with milk and honey. He raised up the sons of in their place. It was these Joshua circumcised. They were still uncircumcised, since they had not been circumcised along the way. After the entire nation had been circumcised, they stayed where they were in the camp until they recovered. The Lord then said to Joshua, "Today I have rolled away the disgrace of Egypt from you." Therefore, that place is called Gilgal today. Now, if you continue in chapter 5, it talks about food from the land, how they ate from Passover, and that after they ate from the produce of the land, the manna ceased. So God's provision ended as soon as they ate from the produce of the land. Once they received the good things from the Lord, they no longer needed God's provision to be able to survive, so that ceased. And it says, since there was no more manna for the Israelites, they ate from the crops of the land at Canaan that year. And then it goes on to talk about commander of the Lord's army. It says, when Joshua was near Jericho, he looked up and saw a man standing in front of him with a drawn sword in his hand. Joshua approached him and asked, "Are you for us or for our enemies?" "Neither," he said. "Neither," he replied. "I have now come as commander of the Lord's army." Then Joshua bowed with his face to the ground in homage and asked him, "What does my Lord want me to do to his servant?" The commander of the Lord's army said to Joshua, "Remove the sandals from your feet, for the place where you are standing is holy." And Joshua did that. So I think this ends our Bible reading for tonight. I'm sorry I'm so late on posting it, but I think that it was a great Bible reading today, learning about Joshua, and I love putting it together with our relationship between God and humanity. And we will read tomorrow. Tomorrow's reading is Psalms 1 and 2, day 4.